According to a recent report in the Telegraph, Putin fears a coup. It is 30 October 2025. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. Please consider subscribing if you want to keep up to date with what's going on. So let's start here. This is the Telegraph. Putin has begun to fear a coup due to worsening economic situations. I do these videos updating the economic situations pretty regularly, every 3 days, 7 days, something like that. Here it is in a new voice of Ukraine. Putin fears a coup as Russia sinks into debt. Drone strikes rise and sanctions bite. Let's look at a little bit of this. The Kremlin is gripped by panic as it runs out of options to keep its power game alive, while U.S. President Donald Trump tightens the screws. The Telegraph reported on October 26, noting that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin now fears another coup. John Herbst, a senior director at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, said that the move indicates that the Kremlin is slipping into paranoia. Putin, the article notes, has plenty of reasons to worry. Russia's economy is starting to buckle. Businesses are paralyzed by soaring interest rates, and the Ministry of Economic Development has warned the country is, quote, on the verge of recession, unquote. Warnings are mounting about an avalanche of non-performing loans that could spark a financial crisis. Meanwhile, small acts of defiance are emerging. Hundreds of people recently gathered in St. Petersburg to sing a banned protest song calling for Putin's overthrow. There's some panic in Moscow. A bank crisis is looming. The numbers are staggering. According to Craig Kennedy, a Russian analyst and former banker, roughly 23% of all outstanding corporate loans in Russian banks, at least 190 billion, are currently held by weapons manufacturers. That's equivalent to about 37% of Russia's annual federal budget. They're militarizing, and it's not going well. And there's a horse race between the economy collapsing and the front lines. Like Putin is betting that he can do something on the front lines or cause Ukraine to buckle in some other way politically, maybe, or something, while the Ukrainians are going after oil depots and things along those lines, oil refineries, in order to cause the economy to collapse first. All sectors of the economy are also struggling under the weight of high interest rates. In October, Russia's central bank cut its key rate by 0.5 percentage points to 16.5%. It's pretty high. The war is also hitting Russia's population as thick plumes of smoke rise above refineries. A sharp spike in gasoline prices and growing shortages at the pump are also occurring. The conclusion was this. He also said Western sanctions have caused serious problems for Russia and that Putin's war machine is now heavily dependent on cooperation with China. To make matters worse, Russia is also facing a rapidly growing budget deficit, and Trump has picked a particularly painful moment to start tightening the screws on Putin. Okay, so that's just one article. So let's just kind of prove it. Oh, by the way, Darth Putin, the humorist, put this out. They should say fear another coup. It's as if that whole Prigozhin thing just happened in a different world to some people. Yeah, you could look at it that way. I didn't know what it was at the time when it happened. I was thinking, like, is he trying to be the chief military guy? But yeah, you could call it another coup. Okay, he fears that. Now, Russian companies can no longer pay their debts. So let me give evidence after evidence after evidence that things are really pretty bad. This is everything that I'm about to show you, with the exception of the article at the end. The last little Darth Putin thing at the end is everything's within the last 1 week period. Okay, Russian companies can no longer pay their debts. Percentage of overdue loans to companies is up 64% since January of 2024. So it's going up. One successful Russian airlines, or the once successful Russian airlines, S7 and Ural Airlines, which used to fly across Europe and boast modern fleets, are now teetering on the edge of collapse. Since the start of the war in Ukraine and the imposition of sanctions, they face severe shortages of spare parts, grounded planes, and mounting losses. The main problem is dependence on Western technology. Around 40% of S7's fleet uses Pratt & Whitney engines, which the manufacturer recalled for maintenance in 2023. Due to sanctions, the company couldn't send them for repairs and lacks the ability to fix them on its own. Out of 105 S7 aircraft, only 76 remain operational. Some planes are missing engines. Others have been permanently grounded. Russian carriers are unable to purchase new aircraft as the gray import of spare parts doesn't cover their needs. Experts warn that by 2026, parts of the fleet may completely stop flying. Passenger traffic in Russia has dropped from 111 million to 95 million. International flights haven't recovered, visas are hard to obtain, and ticket prices have skyrocketed. Meanwhile, flying on worn-out planes has turned into a game of Russian roulette. Yeah. S7 profits have fallen by 1/3 while Ural Airlines debt continues to grow. So there's that. And it makes perfect sense why this would be the case given the sanctions and what it's done to Russia's airlines and not being able to maintain the fleet. Okay. Meanwhile, Russia's plastics industry now is in collapse due to shortage of constituent chemicals because of substitutions in gasoline industry, all because of Ukraine strikes on refineries. So there's a market imbalance. Gasoline production has caused a benzene shortage. Okay, well, yeah, things like this happen. This is even wilder. Russians have completely stopped having children. Complete absence of children. Authorities explain why kindergartens in Rostov region are closing. According to them, there are no queues there. Well, yeah, I mean, wartime conditions do generally cause people to have less children while they're, waiting for things to recover. And yeah, and in Russia, it was already low and it's become even lower. Today, now this is how they're going to cure it, unfortunately, and it's very tragic. Today, an estimated 1.6 million Ukrainian children remain in territories occupied by Russia. Cut off from Ukraine's educational system, they are exposed to daily Russian propaganda, militarization, and pressure to abandon their national identity. This is why we have to do something about those 4 oblasts that Russia has grabbed, stolen, and called their own, because they're going to use these children as Russian soldiers in the future. In a sign of ongoing state budget troubles, in Russia, multiple regions have also reduced their military signing bonuses by 80%. On Monday, Saratov's governor signed a decree lowering the bonus paid to those who sign up to fight in Ukraine from 2.2 million rubles to 450,000 rubles. That's big. So Radio Free Europe had an article about this. Why are Russian volunteers now paid thousands less to fight in Ukraine? Well, Russian regions are reducing signing bonuses for volunteers joining the Ukrainian war, citing economic strain and shifting military priorities. Well, their priorities have gone up, so that's kind of weird, but the bonuses have gone down. Regions like Samara and Tatarstan have cut bonuses drastically, with payments dropping from millions of rubles to the federal minimum of 400,000 rubles. High recruitment costs have strained Russia's economy, leading to inflation and budget cuts. So in Samara region, 400,000 ruble as a signing bonus. That's a $5,000 signing bonus. I've seen signing bonuses as high as 73,000 US dollars signing bonus. I mean, the equivalent in rubles. Of course, you have to wait for 3 months to capture that. And if you're still alive in 3 months, well, congratulations. You're one of the lucky ones just for staying alive. Okay. Now, a week ago, Trump says Putin talks don't go anywhere, and he imposes new sanctions. Secretary Bessent came out with these sanctions on January 22nd, and then we see now. At the time, I showed you what the Treasury Secretary's sanctions actually look like, and there was a weasel clause that the U.S. may do this, not that the U.S. shall do this. So it gives a little leverage, or what will happen with enforcement. But these companies believe it. Look, Lukoil has announced plans to sell its international assets following the latest sanctions imposed by the U.S. and U.K., the company said in a statement. Owing to the introduction of several restrictive measures against the company and its subsidiaries by some states, the company announces its intention to sell its international assets. The consideration of bids from potential purchasers has been started, it said. The sanctions will take effect on November 21st. And again, the weasel clause is there, but Lukoil and Rosneft, the other big company, they're taking evasive actions quick. The sanctions will take effect on November 21st, significantly complicating the operations of Lukoil. Lukoil refineries in Romania, Bulgaria, the Netherlands will be sold or shut down. Lukoil-owned Tybol in Finland had fuel deliveries suspended. Refineries in Hungary and Slovakia may see oil flows cut off entirely. So what's happening to the stock price? Due to U.S. sanctions, Lukoil was forced to announce the sale of its foreign assets, and its shares have fallen 17%. Lukoil is now 20% and Rosneft 13% on the rolling 5-day period, according to Igor Shushko. I went and looked at it personally this morning. It dropped down to a low on the 28th and then has recovered a little bit, but not nearly where it was. This line here is when the sanctions were announced. Actually, it should be over just a little bit on the 20. This should be moved over. Here, I'm sorry. It should be late on the 22nd. So on the 23rd on trading day, it just plummeted. Does selling off their foreign assets include all the Western politicians on the Kremlin payroll? Gary Kasparov asked. Well, that's a good question, but it's been hurtful to them, and that's not even talking about Ukrainian sanctions that have been complicating it, like what we saw last night, going after 3 or 4 refineries or oil wells, or I'm sorry, depots. It was a bad night for Russia, not last night, but the night before. Okay, foreign assets of Lukoil to be purchased by company founded by Putin's friend. So one of the ways that they're trying to get around this is the buyer will be the international commodities trader Gunvor. The company was founded in 1997 by Swedish businessmen. For many years, Gunvor was the largest exporter of Russian oil and ranked among the top 3 global oil traders. Shortly after the annexation of Crimea, Timinchko sold his shares to his partner, the Moscow Times reports. The U.S. Treasury has stated that Putin has investments in Gunvor and access to its funds. So they're trying to get around it somehow, but yeah, they still had to take some evasive actions. Meanwhile, the gas stations, the price of the pump, we've seen all that, and I'm not going to cover that extensively here, just a little bit about it. Russian soldiers say that the army isn't issuing them with fuel for combat operations. They're trying to buy it with their own money, but they're struggling to obtain it in Donetsk because only coupons are now being accepted as payment due to the ongoing fuel shortages. So they can't even get the oil, even when or the gas, when they're trying to buy it with their own money, and that's causing problems at the front. Russia's media version of the fuel crisis is now spreading to Mongolia. Even in Mongolia, Mongolian authorities are battling fuel shortages. Mongolian Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources has urged the public not to panic over false rumors of gasoline shortages. To avoid queues at gas stations, authorities assure the gasoline imports from Russia are continuing as normal without interruptions, TASS reported on Monday. Yeah, but it's spilling into Mongolia. New wave of sanctions are so good for the Russian economy. That's what they came out and said. As soon as Trump sanctioned Russian oil, the politicians came out and said, these sanctions are good for the Russian economy. Russia has gotten off the oil needle, says Andrei Makarov, the head of State Duma's Budget Committee. He said revenues are growing regardless of sanctions. If there had been no sanctions, perhaps everything would have continued as before. Today, our main budget revenues are not linked to oil and gas revenues. He's lying. His statement was made against the backdrop, and nobody believes him here, right? Look at the people's faces. His statement was made against the backdrop of data by Russia's finance ministry showing a 25% drop in oil and gas revenues in September as compared to last year. But he's saying, yeah, no, everything's fine. We're doing great. These sanctions aren't going to hurt us. Sure, they're not, but they're going to. RT posted this. This is Maria Zakharova. Moscow won't face problems from the new EU sanctions. Russia has developed solutions and continues to expand energy potential. EU elites cannot admit the obvious. Their sanctions strike Europe itself. Okay, yeah, I mean, to a small degree, it's striking Russia a whole lot harder, but it is going to affect Europe in some way. Despite Western sanctions, Russian exports rose 18% in 2024 to $330 billion. Of course, China remains Russia's top trading partner, importing $130 billion in goods, mostly oil, gas, and coal. India is now second, having surged past the others as a key buyer of cheap Russian crude. Israel, Turkey, Egypt, Brazil, and Hungary, there's Hungary, that's part of Europe, also expanded imports with the EU. With the EU, are still Russia's third regional partner. Okay, so it is hurting Europe to a small degree, but it's hurting Russia a whole lot more. And by the way, India has started buying oil from Iraq and Qatar following U.S. sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft. according to Bloomberg. And then we saw this. After U.S. sanctions, another tanker carrying Russian oil to India got stuck at sea. The vessel, loaded with 40,000 tons of oil, has been drifting off the Indian coast since October 22nd and cannot enter the port of Mundra, Reuters reports. So far, oil shipments through Russia's western ports, Primorsk and Ust-Luga and Novorossiysk, have not declined. However, banking payments may soon become a real obstacle. So they're shipping it out, but they're not being taken. And that's really the problem for the Russians. And then China is also starting to not take the oil. I saw something where Hong Kong was taking oil the other day, but then I saw this as well. China state oil majors suspend Russian oil buys due to sanctions, sources say. Okay, this was in Reuters. And then we'll leave you with this just for fun. Yet another Russian city is flooded with feces after corruption and decay left sewage systems rotting for decades. A city the size of Mykolaiv is drowning in feces in Russia. This is not a joke. The Russian town feces flooding people's basements, the central hospital, the village streets. They just haven't maintained the systems. Now, you can't say that that's one-to-one. It's just because the Russians are doing this war that they're doing this. They could have had just standard corruption, but you know, the way that they're prioritizing their budget probably isn't helping. Okay, I told you this was the last thing and it wasn't from this week. It was from the week before. This is Darth Putin. It's on the thumbnail. I even asked Darth Putin for permission to use it in the thumbnail. Okay, Ukrainian strikes on our refineries have no effect as average price of fuel is now under 20 rubles per liter, prices that Westerns can only dream of. Oh my, the Russian economy is in really bad shape. I mean, it really is. And if Putin is already worried about a color revolution to begin with before even the war began, watching what happened to Gaddafi and others. And I'm pretty sure he's more worried about it than he was just this time last year or before the war began. All right, tell me what you thought about what you saw here. Put that in the comments below. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.